If you had to stop a horrifying apocalypse from taking over the world, what would you do? You'll have to face fallen angels and terrifying monsters and demons, and you'll have to fight against the only friend you've ever had to save the world. I'm going to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the world of Berserk. This guy's soon going to be literally forced to watch all of his close friends get ripped, torn, crushed by terrifying demons. Guts here is a lone wolf mercenary for hire, and the fiercest warrior in the world, or at least in his mind he is, and he's taking part in a bloodthirsty war. Sieging the enemy's castle, they break through their defenses and begin to kill off every guy here. Coming across this giant warrior defending the castle, the army he's a part of refuses to fight this psycho killer, and Guts gets tired of waiting and challenges him to a one-on-one battle to the death. If I was Guts, I would know that the only way to take this man down would be to go right through his sweat-drenched balls. Let me explain. Bazuso here is known as the 30-man slayer and overall badass, but if we notice, when our army entered the castle, this guy was keeping all of our men at bay just by trash-talking them like The Rock would at WrestleMania. Impressive, but a problem. This guy was using his mythical status to instill fear in our troops. We cannot let that happen, no matter how impressive it is that he is vastly outnumbered by our troops. And this means that he is smarter than he looks and is carrying a battle axe, which means that if he doesn't cut through our armor, he could very well crush our bones anyways. So that means we have to be super careful, and we can't rush him. Because of this reason, there are two tactics that we could use, and one being way less risky. And the other plan involves getting up real close and personal with his balls. And his sheer size alone, on top of the weight of the armor and the weapon that he carries, means that he's probably way slower than us. And so, taking all of this into account, I would stay just out of reach of his first several swings, because this will tire him out. And the first sign that I see that he's starting to slip, I'm gonna head behind him while staying low and take advantage of his shit vision, and then use the opening under his legs, which is very common in armor, in order for maneuverability. I would simply take my sword and chop apart his manhood right here, as this alone would cripple the man forever. And from there, we could take him as a prisoner or brutally kill him, or we could just leave him there to bleed out, because he will be in too much pain to defend himself at all. Drawing his sword, he launches at the enemy with powerful moves no one has ever seen, and he quickly slices through the stomach and splits his head in two. The army cheers and goes on to win the rest of the battle, with him not realizing that he's been watched by this man and his team, a man that will change the course of history. After the battle, Guts takes his pay and quickly leaves for his next adventure. But that's when a group of bandits start charging towards him. On alert, he takes out his sword and defends his salary. The men attack him, but he quickly defends himself and manages to take some of them out. And just then, another warrior leaps at him, but he cuts him down and the helmet comes off, and Guts sees that it's a woman. She lunges at him with speed and precision, but Guts manages to overpower her. And he tries to take off her head, but he is stopped by the team's leader. This man's name is Griffin. He tells Guts to lower his sword so they can talk, but Guts doesn't listen and attacks. But the fight is already over, and he realizes that Griffin has already critically injured him with his lightning quick moves. A few days later, he wakes up all healed and finds out that he is in a camp belonging to the greatest mercenary group in the land, the Band of the Hawk. Griffin approaches Guts and offers him to work for his group, but Guts doesn't trust him and challenges him to a duel instead. Griffin reluctantly takes out his sword and repeats his insane moves on Guts, but finds out that he is a madman, biting his sword and taking him to the ground. Griffin gets dirty and finally manages to win the duel, and Guts admits defeat and tells him that he'll work for the Band of the Hawks. Griffin smiles and tells him that they will work towards achieving his dreams of getting their very own kingdom. But no one here has any idea that obtaining this kingdom will come at the ultimate price. Over the next few years, Guts takes part in many battles for Griffin, and the group gets larger and larger and gains more notoriety and makes an even bigger name for themselves. And one day during their latest battle, they face their toughest opponent yet. The men tell Guts not to go down this basement, because down there is a 200-year-old monster waiting for them inside. But Guts doesn't listen and charges in there like a dog without a brain. Rushing inside, he steps into a pool of blood and smells the fresh stench of rotting corpses. And he comes across this giant demon, Nosferatu Zod. Guts acts without thinking and uses his giant legendary sword against him, and he manages to make a single cut into this monster, and this pisses finishes it off. Suddenly, this demon begins shapeshifting into a huge minotaur beast. Attacking Guts, he gets injured and realizes that this demon can't be stopped. And just then his men show up, but quickly get slaughtered as well. And Griffin then shows up and tries to save him, and the two take pot shots at the demon. It knocks Griffin out cold, and is about to skin him alive when it realizes what's exactly around his neck. The egg of the king. This demon is shocked and suddenly stops fighting. And then he begins chuckling and warns Guts that this man is not his friend. And when this man's ambition collapses, death will come, and no one will be able to escape it. Suddenly growing ginormous wings, the demon blasts out of the castle and leaves Guts with more questions than answers. The next day, both men recover, and Guts questions Griffin about the necklace. What is it, and what does it mean? Griffin's voice tenses up slightly when he responds, and says that he got it long ago from a fortune teller lady, and he mentions that whoever possesses this necklace was destined to obtain the world, in exchange for their own flesh and blood, of course, whatever that means. But then they're interrupted by the king and his entourage, and he tells them how impressed he is with their team, and Griffin thanks him, and he throws an eye at the king's daughter, and she throws one back at him. Griffin, you naughty boy. And no one here has any idea that this mistake will trigger the events of Griffith's demise. That night, Griffin offers Guts a new terrifying job: to commit murder. He tells him that not everyone in this kingdom likes them, including this one guy, who is second in line to the throne. Griffin gets serious and says that this man views him as a threat and will likely have him killed soon. And he tells Guts to go kill this man without question as a favor to him. And Guts, like an idiot, accepts. Okay, this is why I would have killed my target with a bowl of blueberries. Let me explain. The man Griffin is setting us up to kill the brother to the king, a real psychopath. And us killing any royal family member will screw us over big time. It has to, even if we aren't caught. Because as a mercenary group being paid to fight for the king, that's not exactly an uncommon thing back in the Middle Ages. But the fact is that mercenaries are known to be only loyal to whoever pays them the most, meaning that our reputation is not exactly the greatest. And think about it, this kingdom has 5,000 soldiers that are only here because they want to get paid. They're just commoners, serfs, they have no alliances, and we live right outside the castle. So let's play this out. A royal family member gets murdered the moment we start to get closer to the royal family. Coincidence? I think not. A member of the royal family getting murdered will make our band of the Hawks the first suspect. And this king is powerful enough to kill us all if he can't find the suspect. And when you add to the fact that there are many examples of mercenaries throughout history betraying their clients, this means that it's not out of the world to assume that we would be guilty. Also, the idea of trying to assassinate a royal is way too much work and way too risky. Instead, I would utilize certain poisonous plants like wolfsbane, which is a poisonous plant that grows in Central Europe. Only 20 milliliters of this bad boy is needed to kill somebody, and death usually occurs within 2 to 6 hours, which is exactly the time frame we need. But the best part about this is that the wolfsbane poison can also act upon contact with skin through open wounds, which means we could smudge some on our target's open wounds the next time we go into battle, or stuff it into his mouth, since the poison has a delayed reaction, and the first signs of being poisoned are common tummy troubles. And this means that the king will think that our target has sustained wounds or caught an infection from battle, rather than him being poisoned. Later, he sneaks into the castle, killing this one guard, and he slithers his way into his target's room, taking him out. He suddenly hears someone approaching through this door. Launching at the intruder, he puts a hole in his second victim and realizes that he just accidentally murdered a kid. This man's kid! Guts' eyes widen as he tries to help him, but it's no use. And just then he hears more sounds of incoming reinforcements and quickly fights his way out of the castle, getting shot in the arm with this arrow. He manages to jump over the castle walls and escape. The news spreads quickly across the kingdom, but nobody can focus on it for long. The next day, they resume their 100-year battle with this other powerful kingdom, and they get into another bloody battle. Griffin's right-hand woman, Casca here, stops to take on this mid-level boss. I'll call him Uglyface, cause he nasty, and he overpowers her and corners her at the edge of this cliff. Some of her reinforcements arrive, but they get slaughtered in seconds. And Uglyface makes fun of her and prepares to strike her down, but she is saved by Guts at the last moment. He quickly knocks this guy back, but this pisses him off. Uglyface whips out a new move and prepares to use his ultimate spear technique passed down through his family for 140 years, but instead instantly gets his ass kicked. Guts checks on Casca, but she almost falls off this cliff. He tries to catch her and holds on for dear life, but Uglyface shoots an arrow in him last minute, and the two fall down this giant cliff and come crashing down into freezing cold water. Later, washing up ashore, Guts takes himself and Casca to this cave, stripping off their freezing cold clothes. They try to warm each other up. A few hours later, Casca wakes up warmer than a bento box, but she reveals that she is angry at Guts for being a better man than Griffith ever was to her. Not fully healed yet, Guts and Casca try to make their escape, but run into another ambush and meet the same guy from earlier, Uglyface, and he laughs and tells them that he'll soon torture them with a torture technique passed down through his family for 200 years. His men attack, but Guts and Casca manage to put up a good fight, and Guts tells Casca to go get help, and stubborn as hell, she refuses for a sec, and then finally tells him that she'll be back soon. Guts continues to take on the soldiers, deflecting arrows and taking swings, ruthlessly killing dozens of soldiers in this bloodbath. It is a beautiful. Meanwhile, Casca runs into some more soldiers and they pin her down, trying to fight back, and she is saved just in time by Griffith and his men, and she begs them to go save Guts. Back at Guts' position, he slaughters man after man and decapitates more sons and fathers. The enemies start to get even more terrified as they surround him, and he pulls some serious God of War moves and cements his status as a legend among men. Moments later, Griffith's men finally arrive, but they see hundreds of corpses leading up to Guts resting on this tree and hanging on to dear life. They hail him as a hero and give him the name, the 100-Man Slayer. Catching up to the leader of the bad guys, Uglyface, they head back home. Later that night, this rando teammate tells Casca Griff considers her and Guts essential to the group, and she finally gets some much-needed validation. He hands her some magic powder to go apply on Guts. Reaching him, he tells her how seeing Griffith chase a dream is inspiring, and it made him question if he should go find his own dream. And this shocks Casca, and she tells him to focus on the current war at hand, for tomorrow there will be even more bloodshed. In the morning, another battle takes place, sending animal corpses over the wall. More soldiers clash swords and spill blood. More and more of the king's men keep dying, and he begins to get worried that they'll never be able to take down this castle. And just then, a squad of lethal black knights exit the castle, with a fighting force more powerful than they could even imagine. Unable to breach the castle, the king retreats for the day, and that night, he gathers his counselors to give him some much-needed advice. They warn him that most of his men have been killed, including their own legion of knights. They can't keep up this fight for much longer. And then Griffith, sitting at the table in careful silence, tells the king that his group of mercenaries will be able to defeat the enemy, all 30,000 men, if the king lets them and gives the order. The king receives Griffith's confident gaze and accepts his offer. The next day, Griffith's group of 5,000 men prepare for battle. Getting the layout, he is warned of what they're up against. 20 high-tech cannons, an endless sea of incoming arrows, pounds upon pounds of heavy stone catapults, gallons of burning oil resting up above on the castle walls, and legions of the enemy's very own holy purple rhino knights. This is getting way too out of hand for no reason. If I was them, I would have simply offered myself up. Sort of. I would have offered up some of my men in a sort of Trojan horse kind of example. Let me explain. The enemy's castle is situated in front of a mountain that we can see right here, and this means that they only need to defend one area of their castle, which they have been doing brilliantly, unfortunately, and means that we can't sneak up on them or divide their attention by attacking them from numerous sides. However, if I was the king, I would have realized that there was a much easier way to attack this castle, in a way where we would have never even needed the Band of the Hawks, however impressive they are. I would have gone in there by doing what a military group known as the Visigoths did during the destruction of Rome in 410 CE. It's noted that on the battlefield, there are destroyed siege towers left and right over here, and that is something that we can absolutely use. We're going to have this plan start at night. I'm going to have my infantry along the outer walls on both sides of this mountain, while I would put all of my archers hidden within these destroyed siege blocks and towers. And then when everybody's ready, I would then offer some of my most handsome soldiers up to sweeten the deal as servants, because we've been battling each other for all of these years. And once they open up the castle doors to accept my servants, I would then order my archers to begin firing down upon them in a sort of rather creepy barrage at night. It would create chaos at first, and then once my archers are done and then timing it right, I would then order my men stationed on both sides of the castle to begin invading through the open door. That's how I would do it without even needing the Band of the Hawk. The enemy prepares for battle as they are greeted by Uglyface at their front door. He says him and his men escaped and will now fight alongside them, but they don't realize that this is a Trojan horse. Meanwhile, Griffith's men charge down from the field and split his force into two, punching through the enemy's line. He uses his light cavalry's mobility to power through. The enemy orders his heavy cavalry to take them head on, while their archers deploy on both of their flanks, thinking soon he will have them cornered. The archers deploy their hellfire arrows and try to break Griffith's formation, and he soon orders his men to retreat. The enemy's commander thinks something is off, but their arrogant general then steps in and orders everyone to go chase after Griffith and his men, and they quickly corner Griffith's men near this river, and there they make their last stand to destroy the enemy as they advance. The smoke from the battlefield quickly blackens the air, and no one can see anything, and the enemy doesn't notice a squadron of Griffith's soldiers approaching the castle walls, finally infiltrating the base. Griffith's men quickly begin killing bad guys, and Casca and her crew unmask, and also begin killing the rest of the bad guys, distracted. Uglyface uses this opportunity to try and fight his way out, aggressively fighting against Casca and taking her down these steps. He distracts her and pins her against the wall, claiming to have just used his family's 1,000-year-old distraction tactic. He talks too much. And thank you, Lord, Casca steals her sword and quickly kills this guy's BS family ancestry techniques. Oh, thank you, Casca. Back to the battlefield, Guts tries to take on the leader of the Purple Rhino Knights, and his men try to help him, but they get their bones and flesh ripped apart in an instant, and the sky rains with their blood. This guy charges at Guts but misses, and Guts attacks from the air, slamming his head into the sand floor. And that's when the commander suddenly realizes that his castle has been overrun by Griffith's men, and they are now surrounded. His men run away and leave him behind, and he gets swiftly killed by Griffith, signifying the end of the 100-year war. Later, Griffith and crew return to the kingdom they serve and are greeted as gods among men, and that night they get elevated all to knighthood by the king, and there he puts on a lavish ball. Arriving at the venue, Guts gets a little overwhelmed with all the love and affection, and he needs a breather, so he goes outside and he meets up with Casca. She says she'd be more comfortable with a sword, and Guts tells her that she looks good, and this comment was his best mistake. He tells Casca that helping Griffith chase his dream of owning his own kingdom has inspired Guts to find his own dream, and that he truly is considering to leave the group to go find it. Casca is stunned, but their conversation is cut short by the king, who makes a speech and tells everyone to basically get really drunk. Inside, Casca sees Griffith dancing with the princess and gets super bummed out because apparently she can't get over angel face Griffith. Anyways, but then Guts dances with her, and they both forget about their deep conversation that they literally had, and later Guts drinks at the pub and talks to one of his buddies about what he and Casca spoke about, and his buddy suggests that he should bring Casca with him since they've been getting closer, wink wink. But Guts tells him that she is stuck on Griffith like Velcro covered in super glue, and his buddy tells him that she'll never have Griffith because Griffith has set his sight on achieving the best. And how is he gonna do that? By wooing the princess. And since it is now peacetime, a general like him will never achieve much more in any kingdom unless he pulls something crazy off, like marrying the princess. And he reveals that the general who recently died was next in line for the throne, and his son was originally supposed to be a candidate for the princess's hand in marriage. This shocks Guts, and he wonders if there's more to Griffith than meets the eye. Later that night, word gets out that Guts has decided to leave the group, and everybody tries to convince him to stay. Casca begs him to stay, and he's even stopped by Griffith. Griffith challenges Guts to a duel in exchange for his freedom. They draw swords, and Griffith charges at him, thinking that the battle will be over, just like he did in the beginning, with Griffith winning and him continuing to serve Griffith's dream. But that's when he realizes that the battle is over. For him, Griffith's sword was broken, and Guts has now won the duel and has won his freedom. Griffith drops to his knees in shock, and everybody is stunned, and Casca gets even more sad than she even realizes. One day later, Griffith sneaks into the princess's room looking really defeated, and she, like an idiot, lets him in and asks if he's okay. Griffith ignores her words and quickly gets busy with her, and that's when one of the dirty maids sneaks a peek on the princess just to check on her, and she sees Griffith in bed with the princess. She runs away in shock, and the next day Griffith leaves the princess's room but gets caught red-handed. Meanwhile, the king orders Griffith's men and Casca to head to this empty field for a training practice without any of their armor or weapons, and suddenly they hear the terrifying high-pitched roar of arrows raining down from the sky, and they realize that they've been set up. Dozens of men die in seconds, and Casca orders her men to think fast and charge directly towards the archers, barely making it out alive and escaping. Meanwhile, hound dog angel face Griffith is now
now being tortured, and he is told that he must be punished for getting nasty with the princess. And the king's men leave him in the hands of this short thing. This short hunchback of Notre Dame guy prepares to rip off the skin off of Griffith's flesh, and that's when he notices a strange-looking necklace. He jumps and rips it off, but then it stares at him and startles him, causing him to drop the necklace as it rolls down into the sewers. Months later, Griffith lays destroyed in this dungeon, mentally and physically brutalized. And then he notices this necklace turn into this terrifying monster, and it crawls to him. And he has a vision of this unknown angel, all the while as his necklace floats away down this river. Elsewhere, Casca and her group are now outlaws, and she gets word that after months of searching, they finally located where Griffith is being held. Such a bad idea. Look, I get it. While he may be a powerful, fast-slatching medieval cowboy who has absolutely got a gorgeous face, his horny butt has literally ruined everything. These guys are acting way too chill about it. They think that everything's going to turn back to normal? No! And on top of that, they're even more idiots. What are they doing? They're lighting way too many campfires. Look, all over the place, campfires everywhere. What are they doing? They're making themselves visible as hell. Listen, the punishment for the lowest level of crimes during the Middle Ages was getting your head chopped off. And if we think about what Griff did, he did some things to the king's daughter, which means that anybody associated with him would probably face the most horrifying punishment imaginable. Death by Rad Bracken. Means death by breaking the wheel. This is what awaits us. This is what awaits them if they go save Griffith based on the seriousness of his crimes. This is why I would maybe say something super unpopular at the moment and say, hey guys, maybe we should leave him be. It's presumable that being the Middle Ages means that during this time period, mercenaries are extremely common throughout the world, which means that we can always find somewhere else to find work, which means if they just leave the kingdom, if they just bail on Griffith right now, they can find somewhere else where they don't have any history, where they'll be able to start fresh and not have any complicated allegiances. Bottom line, what do you want? Money. You need money to survive. And this means that somebody within the Band of the Hawk should convince everybody else as a group to ditch Griffith, go find somewhere else where they will get paid bank and not have the kingdom of that land try to chase them down and ruin their lives. But then out of nowhere, they hear terrifying screams outside of the tent, and her men begin getting slaughtered left and right. She runs out and yells for everybody to get ready for combat. These boomerangs nearly cut her head off. This assassin appears from the shadows and quickly overpowers Casca, and he demands that she calls off her men right now, or he'll cut off her head in 3 seconds. Resisting, the assassin gets ready to make her death swift, but then he gets pulled off. My guts! He's returned! He faces against this enemy, who releases his thunderclap blades, but Guts uses his sword to create a frickin' storm and breaks his weapons. With more manliness than anime Chuck Norris, Guts forces the rest of the bad guys to retreat. The men here update Guts on what happened with Griffith, and he is shocked. The next morning, he goes to talk about it more with Casca, but she starts attacking him. She is furious with him and says that he ruined Griffith and the Band of the Hawks the moment he left. Guts finally has a realization and lets Casca stab him. He feels guilty for what he's done and sees the sadness in her eyes, and she tries to go swimming with the fishes, but Guts catches her last minute. He calls her crazy, and she approaches him and says that he is always getting cut because of her. And she plants a big kiss right on him, and then they get busy medieval style. But then suddenly Guts has a terrifying vision of a monster. He tries to choke it, but the hallucination then ends, and he realizes that he is choking Casca. Oops. He apologizes and finally tells her his traumatic life story. It's very sad, blah, 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 blah. Go watch the anime. He prepares to leave her, but she hugs him, and he tells her that there is no point in licking each other's wounds. But she tells him that she is not leaving, and they both lick each other's wounds. Wink, wink. Later, Guts wakes up, but senses something approaching him. He grabs his sword and hears a voice whisper out to him. This terrifying warrior approaches him from the mist and warns him of what's to come. Soon, he will go crazy with anger and will be forced to go through the hardest battle of his life. But whatever happens, he tells Guts to struggle, defy, and strive to live. And then the stranger disappears without a trace. Later, Guts' team sneaks into this castle, and the princess from earlier, who apparently was really impressed with Guts the first time, helps guide them to Griffith's dungeon. Heading down this dark corridor, the princess informs them of what lays ahead at this bottom of this pit, telling them of a terrifying creature that ruled the world 1,000 years ago, but one man managed to stop it, named the Skull King. Defeating the evil. He created a great empire but got too arrogant, and his army was eventually destroyed by the 5 angels sent by God. Casca thinks it was only 4 angels, but they don't think about too much of that detail. Reaching Griffith's cage, they open it, are horrified by what they see. Griffith, starved, skinned, somehow alive, and his tongue was cut out, and his tendons cut so he can't escape. Guts crumbles and hugs the shit out of his skinny, almost dead bro, and then the cage door closes, and then short Quasimodo excitedly announces that he's caught the Band of the Hawks. Guts, furious, bashes through the door, and he sends this guy to his doom. They then hear guards approaching them, and Casca tells them they need to run, but Guts loses his shit and sweeps through these men like a wave of death, using their corpses as shields. He leads the way out, a one-man army, and the princess helps them escape. Rushing out of the castle with Griffith, they realize that they are being chased, and a rain of arrows comes crashing down in front of them. Guts and this guy quickly do their job and manage to escape the king's armies and make a clean getaway. Later that night, the Band of the Hawks cheer about having Griffith back, because everything's gonna be better now that he's back. They're idiots. Casca talks to this kid, and he gives her the diagnosis for Griffith, telling her that he will never be able to walk or hold a sword again. Casca is shocked, and she struggles to gather everyone and tell them the bad news. The crew is left speechless and begs Casca to lead them instead, but she tells them she needs time to think. Later, the men get desperate and beg Guts to form a new mercenary group instead. Okay, this is heartbreaking. This is so sad, but this is also the perfect chance to drop Griffith like an empty, used-up chocolate wrapper. Let me explain. Right now, we've been put in a seriously good opportunity to make some lemonades out of some really nasty lemons. We can't let this go to waste. If I'm Guts, I'm going to take charge and lead the group with Casca as my boo, because leaders get lonely. Because think about it, Casca is a good warrior, but she doesn't have that Red Bull energy that we talk about that Guts has in huge supply. He's a one-man army. Because look at it, Griffith at this point finally lacks the sexy muscle bod that we got, which means that all those hours that we spent putting in the gym has finally paid off, and me taking over would increase our Band of the Hawks reputation to clientele, which we would easily be able to get more clients, because everybody knows about Guts. Full of adventure and fun, Guts agrees, but later finds out from Casca that she feels guilty about Griffith and can't leave him. Then Guts has the old switcheroo and says that, you know what, he'll stay as well, but she tells him that he must go. And just then, inside Griffith's caravan, he then suddenly sees a shining light, and a kid approaches him. It's his younger self, and he tells older Griffith that he must go to his destiny. The caravan starts moving as Guts and Casca realize. Guts chases after him, and he sees Griffith crash and fall into the lake. Just then, the world has an eclipse. Guts runs to Griffith, but sees monsters beginning to appear all around him. Making contact with Griffith, the world around them suddenly changes to something horrible. Thousands of heads fill the floor around them, and everyone begins panicking. Guts picks up Griffith, and they hear from the monsters that the festival is about to commence, a feast that happens once every 216 years, and the monsters begin to hail the incoming 4 angels. One of the angels then rises from the ground, Archangel Slan. The world erupts around Guts and all of his men, and more angels appear from the sky. The demons begin cheering as all the men stare on in sheer horror. Griffith thinks that these beings are gods, but Guts knows that they're devils. The fallen angels welcome the humans to their sacred nocturnal festival and tell everyone that Griffith was selected by law of causality and means that he was meant to be here, and they declare that he was selected to be the blessed king of longing, but Guts tells them to go screw themselves. They all laugh and tell him that Guts, you will make the perfect sacrifice. And everyone finds out that the angels around them will sacrifice all of them in order to make Griffith a demon king. He was qualified to become one the moment he obtained the Crimson Egg, revealing to everyone that receiving the Egg of the King is how they are reborn as God-hand guardian angels. The demons around them begin licking their lips, and the angels announce that Griffith must choose to become a demon king himself, and Gus doesn't think that Griffith is evil enough to do it, and that was his biggest mistake. The invocation of doom begins, and they bring Griffith to the altar, shooting up from the ground beneath their feet. Guts hangs on to dear life, but Griffith lets go of his hand, forcing Gus to use his weapon to cling onto the wall himself. Meanwhile, Griffith, now laying in front of these demon gods, they tell him that he must learn about himself first, and they show him a vision of his kid self, realizing that his dream of obtaining his own kingdom is on top of millions of dead people. And he starts crying because he soon realizes that he must obtain his dream, and that he must be okay with the murder of millions. Because what is a man without power? And then he suddenly comes back to reality, and the angels tell Griffith that he just saw the truth within his own consciousness. They tell him that all of his men are what is left for his final journey, and the angels offer up their powers and tell Griffith to say the words, I sacrifice in order to receive them. And just then Guts climbs back up and calls out to Griffith. He looks at Guts approaching and tells him that he was the only one who ever made him forget about his dreams. And he thanks him, and he utters the words of the devil. Suddenly a wall closes around in front of Griffith and cuts off Guts. The sky then crashes down upon everyone, and all humans get branded for sacrifice. And then terrifying creatures begin showing up left and right even more and begin attacking Guts' men, quickly slaughtering them, becoming food for Griffith, the new child of darkness. Casca looks on in shock as this guy saves her and tells her to run, and then she gets saved by Blonde Guy, who tells her that she is now their leader and that the Band of the Hawk will survive with her. But he quickly gets injured and dies in Casca's arms, and she sees more demons approaching her. Meanwhile, on the outside of this dark portal, one of the Band of the Hawk members, this kid, finally arrives, but sees something strange in the distance and sees a warrior battle. But meanwhile, back inside, Guts tries to reach Griffith, but the angels above him tell him that Griffith doesn't want to be reduced. And more demons try to stop Guts, but he brutally murders any that approach him. And he finally gets knocked down this ledge and lands in a river of corpses and blood. And he sees one of his friends in the distance and runs to him. And just then he gets ripped in half by this smiling demon, eating him right in front of Guts. And he gets surrounded by more hungry demons. And then Griffith gets granted wings and turns into the fifth angel. Guts rushes to see Griffith and tries to call out to him, but that's when Griffith reveals Casca. Guts is horrified and tries to go after her, but he gets one of his arms trapped in the monster's mouth. And Guts is then forced to see and hear things that he wished he had never seen before. Unable to do anything, he begins to lose his mind and starts chopping off his trapped arm and breaks it off from the bone. And he charges towards Griffith, but is stopped by his powers. But even then, Guts almost overpowers Griffith, shocking the angels, but then he gets sent up flying into the air and slams onto the floor. A demon then quickly holds him down. Casca, barely alive, tells him to not look, and the angels from above adore the love between Guts and Casca. And then Guts gets one of his eyes stabbed, with Griffith's cold stare being the last thing he sees. But then the eclipse breaks, and down comes the one man who can stop this, the Skull King. He tries to attack one of the angels, but misses. But he carries on and comes charging down, killing all the demons that he encounters. Griffith tries to kill him, but he is too quick and disappears from where he came from. He exits the portal, showing up to the kid from earlier, but this time carrying Guts and Casca in tow. The angels then announce that since the fifth angel has arrived, an epoch of darkness shall soon arrive. That man will soon live in a world known as the Age of Darkness. Days later, Guts wakes up in a cave, missing an eye and an arm. The kid from earlier arrive and tells him that they've been taking care of them. He asks him what happened to all the rest of the men, but then Guts remembers Casca, and he rushes over to see her, but realizes something is off. As he approaches her, she flinches and looks scared. He tries to calm her down, but she runs away to hide behind this little girl. The boy tells him that she has no memory of anything and is gone insane. Guts begins to cry in horror and escapes into the forest, running for hours until he collapses, defeated in this field. And then suddenly he hears some noise and senses demons approaching him, wanting his branded flesh. The Skull King then arrives and reminds him of what he's told, to stay alive, no matter what. Guts has been marked for sacrifice, so demons will never stop hunting him. And then Guts remembers what Griffith did, and his rage motivates him to continue fighting, to save the world, mostly for revenge though. And he grabs one of the Skull King's weapons and picks off the remaining ghosts. He goes full on crazy and plans to send all of God's angels back to hell with one arm. And he finally realizes his own dream, which is to stop the demons, to save the world, to kill Griffith, and restore Casca. But what do you think about the video? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. And as always, don't forget to check out our How to Beat playlist.